Hey everyone, welcome to a new episode of our special season of The Launch Station, Deploying AI in the Enterprise. Today's episode will focus on adapting your services offerings based on client maturity. We're thrilled to welcome Mihir to our podcast today. Mihir serves as Senior Director at CGI, a leading global consulting firm. A technologist at heart, he brings a wealth of experience in data, digital transformation, and artificial intelligence. With extensive experience in client advisory, driving strategic initiatives, and implementing business transformation projects across various industries, he brings a unique perspective on integrating AI and advanced analytics into business processes. So we are very eager to hear his insights on the challenges and opportunities that come with adopting AI in the modern business landscape. Welcome to the podcast, Mihir.
Good evening, Sri, and thank you for having me here. I'm excited to be here today and looking forward to our discussion.
Awesome. We'll start with a icebreaker. Right? Tell us, if you could travel anywhere in the world right now, where would you go and why?
It might be a little hot there right now, but if I had to travel, I would probably travel to Egypt and Morocco. I love exploring history, culture, and architecture, and there's a lot of that in those two countries. So that's where I would travel.
All right, that sounds fun. So for today's episode, as we said, we'll be discussing the sort of journey that clients take in implementing AI, how they mature over a period of time. And with that in mind, I think the first topic we want to touch upon is obviously a lot of us have been seeing a growth in interest in AI among various enterprises over the last few years. Are you actually seeing such a growth, Mihir? And what's really driving this sort of acceleration in interest in AI?
Yeah, it's a good question. So look, AI has been around for several decades. It started all in the late 1950s. The traditional AI, what we call is the machine learning and different models around that, they have been around in organizations. Organizations have built those solutions in the last decade or so, but you normally see that in a data science team or an analytics team, and it's still very popular then. But then in the last few years, I think what I call is the AI's iPhone moment with generative AI and what we've seen with ChatGPT all over the news. What that has done is the power of Gen AI. I think it's people have experienced that at an individual level in companies, even the executives. Have experienced it, and there is a lot of awareness about what it does. So it always helps when something is widely discussed in the news and social media too. But I think the biggest factor for the rapid growth is the potential to have enterprise level of transformation. So now you can have a potential where you can democratize information across the organization, give access to people, you can accelerate some of your internal workflows and processes. And I think that's one of the top reasons, I think, where we've seen such a rapid growth in the last few years.
Interesting. And I love that thought of how people experiencing it at a personal level has led to organizations adopting AI faster. And the last time we chatted about this, you had this framework, this way of classifying where different organizations are in their journey of adopting AI. Can you tell us about this sort of framework you have?
Sure. So every company is at a different stage of adopting AI. They based on their own maturity, their own capabilities, and I typically will categorize them into four categories. Where if you're starting out, if you're a company that has existing analytics department, you're starting out thinking about diving into AI. You're at that Envision stage, where your initial stage, where you're conceptualizing AI application, you're thinking about your strategy and roadmap. You're making your product or service. You want to make your product or service competitive. You want to reduce that operational cost, or you're just looking to position yourself as a leader in the market, right? So that's the stage where companies are, planning and envisioning that future with AI. The next phase is what I call as explore stage. This is the phase where companies are experimenting, and based on their maturity, they've already set up that vision to use AI. And at that point, you are trying out different use cases that you think are going to be impactful to your business. You're doing those proof of values. You're evaluating different AI tools and solutions. And so that's what I call the explore stage. Now, there are companies that are a little bit ahead of those two stages where they've already have a vision of how they want to use AI. They also have tried out some use cases. They've been successful. So at that point, they're in the phase what we call as an engineer phase, where they're building and integrating AI solution into existing workflows, basically working on your data management, governance, execution, and ML ops and all that stuff. So that's your engineer stage. And then there are mature organizations that have gone through those three stages, and they're looking to scale. They're scaling their AI solution across the organization. At that point, it's more about optimization and automation. So that's what they're focusing on. And so depending on the maturity, organizations could be in any of these stages of their AI journey.
Got it. And latching on to something that you said earlier as well about like the information within the organization getting democratized using AI. Would you say that those in the Envision stage or explore stage should stick to more internally focused use cases versus exposing things to end customers, or do you think that doesn't matter? The use case is different, the stages are different.
So the answer is not necessary, but again, I'm generalizing AI into what we call as traditional AI and generative AI. With generative AI, that seems to be one of the popular use cases that we are seeing with our clients. But if you're just starting out and you have not had a lot of AI development before, you could also pursue like the traditional AI, which is developing machine learning algorithms and something that directly impacts your business too.
Got it. And how do you think the needs and perspectives of companies evolve in each stage? Help us understand what companies are going through at each stage of this envision, explore, engineer, and expand.
Yeah, so when companies are setting out those goals initially, where they're envisioning that future with AI, they quickly learn that it's important to have those internal collaboration with their stakeholders, with their business teams. And what we've seen is that there's also understanding that you need to have an internal AI champion, right, in your organization who sort of pushes the delivery, the implementation of that. Very important to have that executive support for budgetary reasons and make sure that you're completely aligned with your executive team on that. So that's typically the learning companies have in that stage where they're envisioning their future. The second stage, we see a lot of companies learn that they have gaps in their data, so they realize that they need to have data strategy, governance. It's also the time where companies take a stock of their talent pool to analyze if they need to go with a buy or a build strategy. So if you have an AI use case that you are experimenting with, do you want to partner with service companies to do that, or do you build something by yourself? So that's another thing that you companies have to think about. And one important thing that we've seen our customers learn from this explore stage is, failure is always a possibility, and that's a learning as part of your journey. You might have taken a use case which sounds great on paper, but when you implement that, there's a chance that you didn't have all the right information and it did not work. So it's okay, and you just move on to the next use case. So failure is always a possibility, and that's sort of what you learn from that stage. And then when you've already established yourself and you've got those use cases in place and you had that success, it's important to remember that this AI journey takes time to get success with it. So it's important to keep that, get that continual support from your executives. Important to build that AI infrastructure and technology, that ecosystem with your partners. It's important to build some of that. And then finally, when you've gone through all those three different stages and you're at a point where you're scaling up, you've been successful, you establish yourself, then you start thinking about cost management, you start thinking about performance management for your solutions, and then finally security and compliance governance as well.
Got it. Given the kind of rapid changes happening in Gen AI and so on, do you think these stages are going to be strictly sequential for an organization where I'm done with Envision and now in Explore? I know it's a framework, but still, do you see it as one comes after the other necessarily, or do you think people can move backwards as well? Are you seeing that happen? Any learning from what you're seeing in organizations?
Yeah, so again, it's not necessary to always go sequentially. We've seen companies skip the stage, and that's okay. And generally that might work, but there could be reasons where it does not work. But this is not a sequential cycle, though. So I'll give you an example. When the traditional AI was very popular, or is still very popular with organizations, they build their strategy, they build their capabilities and infrastructure for that, and they establish themselves. But then here comes Gen AI 2 years back, and then suddenly you're back to the drawing board because generative AI offers you some new opportunities and some challenges at the same time. And so you got to now sit back and again think about, how can we leverage Gen AI to benefit the organization from it, right? So you're back to a little bit of that going through that same cycle over again, where you're now envisioning again and experimenting with Gen AI. So it is more of an iterative cycle, and I wouldn't say it's a sequential one. And then one other thing, the learnings that I think we have seen is it's very important to experiment and adapt. And even when we build products, we realize that we use some of these large language models for Gen AI, and we realize that when we use one model over the other, the performance for our use case is different between different models like Llama or Mistral or any of that. So it's important to keep experimenting and adapting what works best for you.
Yeah, all of this feels like a real goldmine in terms of the opportunity for services companies, right? Like consulting in each stage, because there's different skill sets needed, different learnings that a services company would have working with different organizations around what kind of applications to conceptualize on, what sort of readiness is needed from a data and from a guardrail, from a security standpoint, etc. What should vendors keep in mind as you work with companies that are in different stages of maturity?
So every customer is unique. I think it's important to assess and evaluate the maturity and the stage of the journey. Like I said earlier, sometimes customer wants to jump directly to a particular stage. But as a service company, it's important to ask those questions about, do you have the right AI framework? Do you have the accountability system inside your organization? Do you have the privacy and security framework to support a successful launch of AI? One thing, because AI gets some bad rep because of some news out there, it's also important to make sure that you have a policy of responsible and ethical use of AI, and that's very important as well. And so we've seen examples where companies have built sort of like their own internal chat GPT, but they did not have proper security framework, and sometimes that leads to even sensitive information going out to some of their employees because it's not the security structure was not in place like they wanted.
So, looking at various AI deployments across different organizations, what would you say you've seen as a quick win for companies to get that first taste of success with AI?
I think I'd say Microsoft Copilot is the name that comes to mind. Again, for your audience, if they're not familiar, many people are familiar with it, but if we have people who don't know Copilot, it's basically a generative AI agent embedded into the Microsoft system. It helps users summarize information, find information within the entire Microsoft ecosystem. It automates some of the work and the workflows, and it helps you even create content. So that's one area where I think, which I can think about a success story with, or at least something that is seen across different industries, the use of Copilot. I think it exemplifies the early adoption of AI by seamlessly integrating AI into an existing Microsoft Office application. It is something that has made easy for users to use it. There's no additional training required. The design is very user-focused, user-centric. It provides real-time assistance and continuously learns from user interaction, scalability across various business tasks and the organization, and that makes it pretty powerful.
Amazing. That sounds like a good, easy win for a lot of companies to have. Have you seen real impacts and benefits from this? How are companies possibly measuring the impact they're having from something like Microsoft Copilot?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, there is definitely increased productivity since it helps automate routine tasks. It allows users to focus on more strategic activities. Enhanced decision making comes to mind. Think about you missed a meeting and you're one of the decision makers. It helps you summarize the entire meeting content. If you're focused on certain data points that you need from that meeting to make your decision, you can jump right into it and you can learn about the discussion without just focusing on what you were trying to look for. It accelerates your decision-making power. Otherwise, without that, you'd have to talk to people or go back and look at summary notes and all that stuff to understand what was discussed, whereas this provides you with that directly. It also gives you improved user experience. It gives you personalized assistant. It knows your preferences, how you draft your emails and things, where it can also customize things for you directly. It can streamline workflows. And then finally, because of increased productivity and efficiency, it is going to result in some cost savings as well.
And it feels like this is the ideal use case, given it feels like this is something that's easy to deploy, minimal or no training for the users, simple UX that they can just, that they're already used to. What do you think services companies should learn from this sort of early adoption of AI in enterprise?
So I'd say it's important to see that how Microsoft seamlessly integrated this into an existing product. And this is what we need to learn is like it's if you are able to integrate an AI feature into existing product or workflow, rather than bolting on top of an existing product. So we see sometimes in legacy applications where you have to put the AI feature on top of it and bolt it on. But if you have something that can be seamlessly integrated, it makes it easier for your users. So that's something to keep in mind. We've also seen other companies like Salesforce and ServiceNow start doing that, where they're building their features right into the product. The other thing service companies can learn is about strong focus on user-centric design to drive adoption. Again, adoption of any AI solution is the key. So the importance of continuous improvement based on user feedback and performance data, and having that iterative approach is very important. That's something you can, I think, learn from that Copilot design. And then for me, the bigger thing is how Microsoft has addressed some data privacy concerns here, and also the AI accuracy is very important to build trust and acceptance amongst your users. So being a product that's upfront using organizations, I think it's important to learn from that you need to build a product that your users will have trust using.
Got it. You talked about the success of something like Microsoft Copilot. What about blockers or pain points in AI implementation? What are the typical blockers you're seeing when it comes to deploying AI?
So I'd say data quality and availability of data itself it can be a pain point. You can sometimes have inconsistent or fragmented data. You could have frequency of data that may not be in line with what your AI solution needs. The other thing that comes to mind is integration with legacy systems. You have an AI solution now, you need to integrate that with the legacy system. That could be a challenge sometimes. It can take more time sometimes than building the AI system itself. There is user adoption. You can have a very fancy AI solution, but if it's not user-friendly or if your users do not resonate with it, then there is low ROI on that because you really want your users to use it. The other thing that is very important is change management. You will sometimes see internal resistance to AI-driven processes due to fear of job displacements. So it's important to address that change management, that AI is only going to augment your capabilities as users and not displace you. It's important to keep that because that could become a pain point. And then when companies have successfully deployed an AI solution, they realize that when they're trying to scale, the processes can be fairly complex and resource intensive, and scalability can become a problem.
Yeah, these seem like important problems to tackle. I'm guessing, change management will help with the user adoption. What about best practices and ways to address the other two problems you talked about, the data quality issues or the integration with legacy systems? Are there any best practices, ways of working that have emerged or frameworks that have emerged to tackle these today?
Yeah, so a lot of organizations we see today are focusing on their data strategy, governance. We see more mature organizations also have a chief data officer, primarily focused on overseeing that whole function because data is so important to organizations these days. So there's a lot more focus on that. So that's one area where you need to provide a complete oversight, a department that oversees some of that. The other thing I think to address some of these pain points is, when you have a win in a project, when you're doing a large integration, having even small wins along the way builds that momentum. So if you're going after a large project, make sure that incremental integration happens and you're not sort of just doing the whole thing at a time, because sometimes having those small wins keeps the morale up and builds that confidence in the process as well. And then finally, always account for change management, even as early as during the design and the development phase.
Got it. And when we talk about services companies trying to address these challenges, are there any things they could be doing to position themselves better in this space to address? I think companies will recognize these as common pain points around data, around legacy systems, etc. What could services companies do to position themselves as ready to solve these, clearly come across as a vendor that you should be working?
So it's important to think about AI as a tool to get to the business objectives you're trying to accomplish, right? So it's very important to align your AI solution with the business outcomes, because ultimately that's what's going to matter. And the other thing I would say is, if you're building a custom solution, important to prove first that it works, that it's feasible and it'll work, and then scale later. So prove first, scale later. That's something important. And then it's important as a service company to talk about human AI collaboration. Remember, when you are making that value proposition, pitch AI more as something that augments human capabilities and not there to replace them. In some cases, it's important, but some cases, generally, I think AI augmenting human capabilities is looked more favorably than not. And then have clear and measurable outcomes that helps your clients understand the value of your solution.
Understood. Is there also an angle, where in some industries there may be some IP that you develop, which serves as an accelerator in deploying AI solutions in certain kinds of companies? Do you think that's a strategy that could work from a value prop and winning over clients for AI services business?
Yeah, if you have a product specialized in a certain industry doing a certain function, and if it's proven where it does actually address their concern, I think those are popular. We see that with customer contact centers, where there are generative AI solutions that help with driving efficiency in customer contact centers and improving the customer agent productivity in general. So yes, absolutely.
Got it. How much within the enterprise is happening from peer pressure versus real necessity to deploy AI? I think this is maybe a controversial question, but I'm just curious to hear your view on it.
But it might be controversial, but it is definitely a factor. We hear from our clients all the time that they get questions asked by their C-level about their AI strategy and how they're going to continue to embrace that, and how will they leverage it in the future. So there is also a perception that if you're not embracing AI, you are already behind the curve. And we've actually seen that even with company stocks with heavily invested in AI seem to get appreciated on Wall Street. We've seen that in the last few months as well. And the other thing is, if you are from a business necessity standpoint, you always have to look out for your competitors coming out with features or products that might eat into your share of the market share, and they might displace you. One example that I think your audience will appreciate is, we all have been using Google search for years now, and everybody loves Google. Lately, I've been using a search engine called Perplexity.ai. By no means promoting them, but again, something I just learned a lot by using Perplexity AI, and there are times where I use that over Google, and it's just not a big company.
Interesting that your personal habit has shifted towards using them as well.
Yeah, and the other example is, Apple recently partnered with OpenAI despite them having their own LLM, which is in development, and that's because of the performance and versatility of OpenAI's ChatGPT. So I think the message is, do that make sense for your business and ultimately your customers.
That's right. And do you have any examples that we can learn from in terms of successful and unsuccessful AI initiatives that you've seen?
Yeah, absolutely. But before I jump in, I want to just talk about one concept in AI, what we call as human in the loop and human on the loop or off the loop. So human in the loop is where AI systems will assist a human to make the decision. And the human on the loop is humans are more like a supervisor to an AI system where they can stop something from happening, like you'd see in an autonomous vehicle where the self-driving option, a human can override that. And then there is a concept of human off the loop, where it's a completely autonomous AI system where there is no human oversight. And I'll explain why I talk about these three concepts. But going back to your question about successful and unsuccessful AI initiatives, there's a company called Stitch Fix that uses Gen AI to actually dress us better. They look at fashion trends and customer preferences to create unique designs and offer that to their customers. So it's a pretty cool way of leveraging Gen AI and offering specialized service to their customer. The other area I would say is in the medical industry, where computer vision AI helps interpret brain scans and helps radiologists make decisions for hemorrhages. And sometimes the way it works is the AI makes the first pass, and then the final decision is made by a radiologist. So that's another area that we have seen a good successful use of AI. Now, talking about unsuccessful case that comes to mind recently, this was in the news where General Motors chatbot, I think it was a General Motors dealership chatbot that gave away a fully loaded 2024 Chevy Tahoe to a hacker who just basically tricked it to say that it had a budget, that he had a budget of, he or she had a budget of $1, and seems like it signed up for that deal. So and then the other example that comes to mind is one of the Canadian airlines had a chatbot instruct a passenger who was assured that he could book a full fare flight for a funeral and then apply for a bereavement fare discount afterwards. And that was truly not in their policy. So again, things like that can happen sometimes with human off the loop. So in these two cases, there's more like human off the loop. So it's important to design your systems to keep that in mind, whether you want a human in the loop or on the loop.
You're talking about human in the loop. During the development and deployment of AI initiatives, what sort of collaboration is necessary given the amount of things that are changing on a daily basis, the amount of things that maybe need to go through approvals and so on?
Mhm.
What do you suggest as best practices from a partnership between the client and the vendor? How important is it to get that right?
So it's important to involve all your stakeholders at each stage of your implementation, right from starting with design, testing, I'd say even training and launch, because that knowledge sharing at that different stages really helps. It's important to have that iterative development and feedback sessions at each iteration. Again, like I've said before, user adoption is the key. So training and user experience, especially when you're designing something, making sure that is this something that'll enhance the user experience, asking those questions are important. And then finally, I'd say responsible and ethical use of AI is something that is very important in when you're aligning your AI projects with business goals.
Got it. And you talked about two cases of things not working out, the Canadian airline and the GM chatbot getting tricked. What sort of collaboration between vendor and client could have potentially prevented that? Any thoughts on what needed to happen better over there?
I think that was more primarily, I'd say, a design issue or a solution design in general. If you are putting a chatbot in front of the customers directly, you need to have guardrails to make sure that any additional contract type of situation is not in the hands of the AI chatbot to make. It still has to be something where it goes through that human in the loop process. But generally, I think with any IT project, AI projects are very similar. You need to have hybrid teams where you are bringing the domain and business needs from the client side and making sure you have a cross-functional team where you can have a technical team from the service side and then a business team from the service, so from the client side. It's also important to have that mutual discovery process between what works and what doesn't. Start with those, like I said, initially pilot projects where you're experimenting, you're doing a data-driven evaluation. It's important for clients to look at the experience and talent available with the service companies. For the service companies, it's important to know the infrastructure and technology platform that the client has, what sort of privacy and safety frameworks they have. And then I think finally, it's very important again to have those small wins before you build that momentum. So to cap it off, I'd say at every stage, there has to be collaboration with a different level of stakeholders.
We'll come to the last question of the podcast, Mihir. What do you see? What do you expect in terms of future changes we'll be seeing in enterprises with respect to adoption of AI?
The transformative changes that we expect to see, I'll say that in the next few years, we'll see a multimodal ecosystem. Where what I mean by that is you would see AI agents that will be able to process information through texting, with video, with voice. Some of that will be built even into a hardware. You started seeing some of those products today in the market. There's a product called R1 Rabbit, and then there's also a Humane AI pin that has some of those multimodal capabilities. So you're going to see more of that in the future. You're going to see a customized RAG models. Expect new legislation, and companies would have to work around some of that new legislation in AI. And then I'd say there will be some deepfake, as there's already a lot of deepfake proliferation that is happening, but not at the level, but there could be some of that happening more in the future. And you will see, to counter those deepfake proliferation, there will be what we call as hunter-killer models to identify and neutralize them. And then I think we're also going to see very accelerated software lifecycle development process where building a website or modernizing an application code maybe a matter of days in the future and not weeks.
Awesome. This has been super insightful, Mihir. Thank you so much for sharing all of your inputs with us and taking the time to do this with us today.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to share my experience and thoughts. And just one last thought for your audience. Remember, AI is very powerful, and it's like a digital genie. It grants incredible wishes, but we must be thoughtful and responsible in how we wield its transformative magic.